Hi everyone, it's Panjno here. This video is an overview, impressions and first-hand experience of KTC's brand new M27P6 monitor, featuring a 4K 160Hz mini LED 27-inch panel with 1152 local dimming zones and support for HDR1400. Dual mode support, doubling the 4K 160Hz mode with an alternate 1080p 320Hz mode, unlocking vast compatibility. And this is from someone with quite a unique perspective. KTC reached out and sent this display over for the video. They have not paid for this video and have yet to ask for the monitor back. With that said, as always, please watch and consume as much content on any product you are looking at to ensure that you're making the best decision for your needs and what makes sense in your specific market. Over 2 years ago, KTC reached out with their new line of mini LED monitors. This featured a 1440p mini LED display and a 4K 160Hz mini LED display. After covering them in a video over 2 years ago, the 4K 160Hz mini LED display became my main monitor for everything. Content creation, video editing, thumbnails, content consumption, movies, TVs, competitive gaming, and maxed out 4K gaming. This was on both AMD and Nvidia GPUs. Since then, I have used multiple OLED panels from 1440p 240Hz OLEDs to 4K 240Hz dual mode WOLED displays at 32-inch. And as great as those displays are, they're not the best at everything. And that's why I eventually kept going back to the KTC 4K 160Hz previous generation monitor for my realistic mixed use and for my personal preference of brightness and vibrance. And this display gave me a better overall experience with the different use cases I have. Sure, the OLED panels were faster, but they were drastically dimmer. They had better black levels, but had worse text and details with different sub-pixel layouts. A small but real risk of burn-in, potential for worse VRR flicker, especially at lower frame rates where playing games like I do, you might see drops where that flicker becomes very real, and most important, the cost. They are still drastically more expensive. This isn't to say that OLEDs are bad, they're not. They are amazing, but they are only amazing at specific things, and if your requirements line up with those specific things, you'll have a great time, but it will still cost you. When KTC reached out with their brand new M27P6 and I saw the specs sheet, I knew I had to get hands on it right away. This was a complete overhaul upgrade to my already favorite display type, a 4K 160Hz mini LED. This time we get a heavily updated and cleaner design. The new aesthetic and stand design is a big improvement and the connectivity remains excellent. We have two HDMI 2.1 ports, DisplayPort 1.4, Type-C with display and 60-watt charger support, the built-in KVM switch to use the same mouse and keyboard between any of your connected devices to the display, and then the big stuff. Here we have a 4K 27-inch 160Hz dual mode panel, allowing us to switch this over to a 1080p 320Hz mode for competitive games. This is completely optional, but it's great to have. 1152 dimming zones and certified VESA HDR1400 support. You can check the full specs list on screen now, and you can find more information using the links below. And most important, the price. This is a seriously good deal. Check the links below and sites like Amazon. Here in the UK, I've seen this go as low as £320. And with how vast and well positioned KTC's monitor offerings are, if you don't think you need the HDR1400 support, the mini LED and the dimming zones, you can get the version of this display with HDR400, but at the same 4K 160Hz 320Hz dual mode for as little as £220 with the H27P6. Comparing these to the closest OLED equivalents, you're looking at over £500, making the top of the line M27P6 featured in this video 43% less than the nearest OLED equivalent. That saving is huge. With how good mini LED has become, especially here with the full 1152 dimming zones and a 27-inch panel, you'll be surprised how good a great implementation of local dimming is to OLED black levels. Take a look at this comparison. How quickly can you tell which monitor is OLED? You can tell and you will eventually see it, but it's much closer now, to the point where if these were not side by side, you'd be very convinced in a lot of cases that it could be OLED, with the added benefit of 1400 net peak brightness. OLED wins in outright black levels, but it loses when it comes to brightness, so it's not a straight win for OLED. It comes down to preference, and for me, I personally prefer the brightness. If I want the OLED experience, I have and will continue to use the M27P6 instead, with HDR and local dimming compared to an OLED panel. The sheer amazement of how near lifelike street lamps are, highlights, light coming in through windows, other light sources, and how you still get those near perfect blacks with the higher local dimming zone count this display gives you, it's a better experience in my opinion in games and video content. When OLEDs can get as bright as mini LED in SDR content, where I and most of us will still spend the majority of our time playing PC games and consuming content, and the sub-pixel layouts and text fringing can be cleaned up just a bit more, for myself OLED will become a more compelling option, but it will still cost at least double what this display would in the premium category. It's not to say that mini LED is perfect, it isn't. It's not to say OLED is perfect, it isn't. Both of them have their pros and their cons. It just depends on what monitors are available to you at your price point that you're willing to spend, and if the specs and features on offer line up with what you actually want for the content and games that you play and consume. Both options are completely valid, it's just about finding what fits you best. And it's important to know that mini LED is definitely a more than viable option if you are in the market for a premium grade monitor. And it might even be the better option depending on what it is that you do and the environment you're using it in. The 320Hz dual mode is smoother than the 240Hz of my OLED display, so I no longer feel like I'm giving up the speed or smoothness of ultra high refresh rates. OLEDs will have better motion clarity due to how lightning fast OLED pixel response times are, but comparing them side by side in games that I play like CS2, I don't find I'm missing anything here, and I prefer the brightness of the mini LED display. And for some insight on my personal use, I tend to use the 320Hz dual mode setting when I'm playing CS2 Premier, Deadlock, Fortnite, Call of Duty, where I favour speed over visual fidelity. And for those interested, VRR also works great in the 320Hz mode, and I personally also have that enabled. If you do plan on utilizing the dual mode or lower resolutions on any display, if the game supports it, like CS2 and Valorant, make use of MSAA set to either 2 or 4 times for the best visual results. This cleans up a lot of the harsh jagged edges. You can then add some additional sharpness. I like to set the monitor's sharpness to 100%, and this gives a really competitive, clear, crisp image at super high FPS. If you're looking for sheer speed and performance from a monitor, a 1440p Gen 1 or Gen 2 OLED display, or one of the newer ones, if you can find an incredibly good deal, it might be the best option for you if sheer speed and performance is what you're looking for. But one thing I would really like to point out, if you're someone that plays just a few select games and any of those games have static UI elements that are on screen throughout the majority of your gameplay, if you're planning on utilizing an OLED for many years, it's quite likely you're going to run into some level of burn-in. This isn't something you're going to notice immediately, but if you're planning on getting a monitor and using it for years, it is something that you're quite likely to run into with an OLED panel, even if you do look after it. There are ways to slow this down, potentially mitigate it, but it is something that you seriously need to weigh up. But if you're looking for something that's really going to surprise you, look fantastic in all games, and deliver you a great experience across everything in all environments, then 4K mini LED with the M27P6 is definitely the option that I would pick and recommend to most people. So we've got a very close match to OLED black levels with better brightness, as fast refresh rates with the 320Hz mode, little to no potential for VRR flicker, unlike what could be seen on some OLEDs, no risk of burn-in, brightness that is completely worlds apart with any OLED and most monitors on the market from any panel type, a much lower price tag, better HDR support depending on what's more important to you, whether it's brightness or black levels, better text when compared to OLED's odd sub-pixel layouts, which are getting better, but text on this type of display, especially at 27 inches, is still superior, higher PPI when compared to 32-inch OLED offerings, a built-in KVM switch, low input lag modes, and fantastic response times. It's quickly become an option that I would recommend anyone to look at, and an option that I have personally pinned as my favorite on the market. For me, it does everything well, and for many features, it cannot be beat. Completely genuinely, if I had to pick a monitor on the market right now and everything else be locked from me for good, I am picking this, and I have picked this with the last generation panel. But with this, it's been completely overhauled with vast improvements to everything, new features and modes, and the only things that I was missing out on with ultra high refresh rates and a near match to OLED black levels have just been added onto this. This will be on my desk for everything, and if you're interested, check the provided links below on more details of the display and where you can pick one up. If the features of this display and your usage line up with mine, this is something that I would highly recommend that you consider. with the display featuring reverse charge on the Type-C port alongside display in for quick and easy access to a 4K desktop without the addition of needing any USB hubs because you have the built-in KVM switch. If a mouse and keyboard is connected to the monitor, the moment you plug a phone, laptop, or anything through the Type-C port, you'll be able to use the mouse and keyboard connected to the monitor directly on that device and have it charged up to 65 watts with just a single cable. For those interested in my settings and how I've been using the display, I've been primarily utilizing it with my RX 97T XT from PowerColor, where I have the 10-bit RGB mode enabled in the AMD settings. The GPU is connected to the display via the HDMI 2.1 connection. I have the brightness set between 80 and 100%. Black level is set at 50%. For sharpness, in the 4K mode, I have this set at the standard 50. In the 1080p dual mode, I have this set between 60 and 100% depending on the game. Under professional modes, I use the DCI P3 mode, and I would highly recommend that you use it unless you specifically need to use one of the other ones for specific work. Color temp is set to user. Adaptive sync is enabled, which will enable Freesync or GSYNC depending on your GPU. Overdrive I have set to advanced, but you could use the dynamic mode. Low input lag is switched on. Local dimming is set to auto, and I highly recommend that you keep it on auto. This will keep local dimming off in SDR, which you want because that will give you the fantastic uniform brightness across the entire panel in SDR where your dynamic range is limited anyway. When you switch to HDR, which can easily be done in Windows 11 at any time by pressing Windows Alt and B, local dimming automatically enables, giving you the best settings for HDR, where you want to be using local dimming. You don't have to jump into the monitor settings and adjust everything every time you switch, it's just that simple. Under the HDR settings, I'm utilizing the HDR VESA mode, and that's it. For dual mode, this can be accessed via the gaming setup menu. One thing I would highly recommend that you do, jump into the monitor's menu settings, go down to system set, go down to hotkey. You then need to select which direction you want to press the hotkey in to enable it. For me, that's going to be right, and this is referring to the joystick on the back of the monitor. Then you select what you want the hotkey to do. For me, that's going to be dual mode. Anytime I want to enable or disable dual mode, all I need to do is press the joystick on the back of the monitor to the right hand side, select dual mode enable or disable, and it's just that quick and easy to use. It's way quicker than using the standard setting. My time with this display so far has been amazing. From the first time I booted it up, being amazed at how uniform the panel brightness is, how vibrant and poppy the colors are, and text looked, even compared to the old gen version of this display that came out 2 years ago that I was using right up until the moment I switched these over. Playing ultra fast 320Hz games of CS2, Fortnite and COD give me the experience my older 360Hz 1080p display gave me, but now even brighter and on my main display. And then playing games in HDR1400 like Horizon, Ratchet & Clank, Red Dead and more at 4K 160Hz. This experience is genuinely mind-blowing. It makes games you're used to look brand new, and it gives you that real next-gen upgrade feeling. Just from how beautiful and bright this display can be, and how dark it can get with those 1152 dimming zones, giving you that near OLED-like experience, it can have you looking at games that you're used to playing in a completely new way. Streetlights on this display can get so bright they almost feel like there should be heat coming off of them. Especially here in this example with Cyberpunk, walking near this light genuinely feels as if there should be some sort of heat coming from that, without looking blown out. It's hard to capture this on camera, especially when the end video you're watching has been encoded so many times over, but in person, especially when you dial in the settings correctly, this monitor is genuinely mind-blowing. My entire coverage and usage of this display has been with an RX 97T XT and RTX 5060 Ti 16GB. And if you're willing to use optimized settings and occasionally use some DLSS 4 or FSR 4 upscaling, not frame gen, although you could pair it with these and it would be great, you're getting a fantastic experience even on these more sensibly priced GPUs. Don't think that you need to be spending over $1,000 on a GPU to drive this display, you simply don't. Monitor tech has come so far even in the last 2 years. Prices are constantly coming down, the market's getting more competitive, and so many options are coming in now that are very valid. It might very well be the case that an OLED does fit you best, but these mini LED panels, especially the M27P6 coming in at the price that it does, offering these specs and this level of performance, is something that I would highly recommend that every single person watching this video considers, but from someone that has utilized one of these panels for over 3,000 hours and not just sat it on a desk for a couple of days to use something completely different a few days later. This panel type is something that I would highly recommend that you look into because it could very well be the best option for you and one of the best priced. Those are my thoughts, overview and impressions of the KTC M27P6. Please let me know of your questions, thoughts and feedback below. Shop around for the best deals and use the links below. Now I'm off to make some more videos and play some games on this fantastic display.